On today's show, we're going to discuss the top 10 serious injury situations to watch this offseason. We'll do this through the lens of PUP candidates, just to separate, the kind of typical minor injuries from the ones which are actually threatening to have guys miss games. And thinking back to last year, there were a lot of guys who were PUP candidates. Cooper Kupp, Tony Pollard, Javonte Williams, Breece Hall, Kyle Pitts for a time, Kyler Murray, Brock Purdy. Understanding when and how to draft these guys was huge. And, people are blaming, and maybe rightfully so, the seasons that Kupp and Pollard and Pitts had on trying to play through injury. Meanwhile, Breece Hall, Purdy were huge hits and kind of keys to winning in any fantasy format. So I think really important stuff to understand. Let's get into it here. We're going to go through 10 guys who are PUP candidates. And to be clear on PUP, this means reserve PUP means you start the season ineligible to play. Daniel Jones, number 10 here, blew out his ACL, had surgery in late November. Now, these quarterbacks, they can come back fast from ACLs. Daniel Jones is already back throwing. He's expected to be cleared for camp. My concern, Sam, is not that he's going to start the year on PUP. It's that so much of his fantasy value was tied up in rushing, 31.9 rush yards per game in his career, 0.22 rushing touchdowns per game in his career for Daniel Jones. If he loses that, it's really hard to justify him as a fantasy quarterback. So what do you think about the Daniel Jones situation, Sam, and any interest at all in him?
Yeah, I think for Daniel Jones, you kind of have two concerns. I think the injury concern, we're obviously talking about that today. I think he is likely to be back pretty early in the season. The injury timeline makes a week 1 return for him pretty plausible. I do think, on the rushing yards point, Edwin Porras did a study that showed rushing opportunities decreased by 20% for quarterbacks coming off ACL tear. So if you're counting on Daniel Jones to get it done in fantasy through the ground, there's some risk there. And then finally, I think, the Giants don't have anything tied to Daniel Jones in 2025. They can pretty easily get out of his contract after this year. I would not be shocked if the Giants are a team that takes a shot on the J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix, Bo Nix type quarterbacks in this draft. And that makes me pretty wary of him in fantasy. I think there is decently high risk that end of the season, the Giants are struggling and they put in Bo Nix and see what they have in him or something along those lines. So I'm probably going to fade Daniel Jones. I just don't think there's too much upside there. And there's a ton of downside of him just being a 0 by the end of the year.
They also have no weapons, right? I mean, Barkley might be gone. They have Wandale. They have Jalen Hyatt. It's really hard to succeed. And the rushing stuff was why it was so attractive. Daniel Jones' ADP is currently around 178 overall. Evan, any thoughts on the Daniel Jones situation? Giants have gotten themselves into a bit of a mess here.
Yeah, my only thought would be that he kind of profiles as like a QB3 last round pick. I mean, I wouldn't want to put any more stock in a player who already wasn't very good, coming off a torn ACL, at risk of losing his job to an incoming rookie. There are a lot of quarterbacks that are going to go in the first and second rounds this year, and the Giants are a prime candidate to draft one of them.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a difference in quarterback archetypes coming off ACL. We're going to talk about Kirk Cousins here in a little bit. To me, he's less affected by his injury. I know it's an Achilles, but less affected than someone who needs to be mobile like Daniel Jones. Number 9 is Kendrick Bourne. Kendrick Bourne suffered an ACL tear on October 29th in Miami. Reports are he's ahead of schedule, but I still think unlikely to be back week 1 for Kendrick Bourne. It seems very likely the Patriots are going to select a quarterback with their first pick. Who will he be throwing to is another discussion altogether. Sam, any thoughts on the Patriots pass catchers and Kendrick Bourne?
Yeah, so Bourne is actually a free agent, I believe. So that adds additional uncertainty for him. He was actually, I guess, on Bourne, he was pretty good last year before he got hurt. He was kind of the Pats' de facto number 1 wide receiver, was on pace for around 80 catches, 900 yards, 9 touchdowns. So he was on pace for a solid season. I just don't have much interest in, a guy who's a free agent coming off an ACL tear that probably will, have him miss a couple weeks to start the year. There's just a lot of risk there. Last round pick, sure, but there's sort of a lot of red flags with him.
Yeah, and to be clear, the current Patriots roster is so laughable. The earliest player they're getting is who's getting selected in drafts is Ramondre Stevenson at 72 overall. After that, the next Patriot selected is 161 overall, Demario Douglas. I mean, they are just totally devoid of offensive talent whatsoever, even though people expect them to take an exciting quarterback over third overall. So yeah, Evan, any Patriots thoughts or Kendrick Bourne? I mean, this is a total mess on both fronts, I think.
Kendrick Bourne's been around a long time, and I know he had a lot of opportunity last year, and he's a fine possession receiver, and he was good. He's good in the red zone, and he can win contested, but he has to win contested because he can't run at all. And now he's coming off a torn ACL. Like, no thanks. Someone else can draft him. Elliott Wolf, the new Patriots GM. Well, first of all, the Patriots have the second most cap space in the NFL, and they have like a ton of dudes who are up for free agency. Elliott Wolf came out at the combine. He's like, we're going to spend. They're going to be extremely active in free agency. They also, Bob Kraft has not really had the opportunity to be extremely active in free agency, although they had some years where they were active. But for the most part, they weren't a big free agency team. Now they have that opportunity. They're going to remake the roster.
Yeah.
The roster is going to be wholly remade.
Yeah.
For sure. All right. Let's get to an exciting one. Keaton Mitchell, man, just thinking about how the Ravens season ended out with like featuring Justice Hill and Gus Edwards, I actually think Keaton Mitchell may have made a difference for them. Unfortunately, he suffered an ACL tear in his left knee in December. Currently on the Ravens roster, the only running backs, I believe, are Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell. So that's led to a lot of speculation about Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, other running backs going to Baltimore. I don't think we can expect Keaton Mitchell to be ready for week 1, but I would love to see him contribute down the stretch for the Ravens. Sam, how do you think about handling Keaton Mitchell right now as he comes off of his knee injury?
Yeah, I think Keaton Mitchell, I mean, he really looked like an awesome change of pace running back last year. I think he should be back based on sort of the injury timeline. It looks like he'll be back somewhere in sort of the week 4 to 8 range if I was to put a prediction on it. So I think he's still draftable, I guess, this year in fantasy. I would project he goes into the season as the Ravens running back 2 behind some free agent that they're likely to add. There's just a lot of uncertainty here. It's a really hard situation to project until we know what the Ravens do in free agency. But, if I am going to bet on guys coming off ACL tears, I want to do it with younger athletic running backs. And Mitchell checks both of those boxes. So, yeah, I'm still willing to draft him, but it's a big wait and see as we see who the Ravens add in free agency.
Keaton Mitchell, current ADP, Evan, is 170 overall. And as Sam said, likely his timeline doesn't get him back until weeks 4 through 8. Obviously, late season production is more valuable than early season production, given when it happens in the fantasy season. But yeah, any thoughts on Ravens backfield right now? We'll be talking about this plenty in free agency stuff also.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to go get somebody. Gus Edwards is not expected back. J.K. Dobbins is a free agent and coming off, an injury and a torn Achilles that no running back has ever successfully returned from, except for maybe Deontay Foreman. It took him like 5 years to come back and be like an effective role player, and he just crushed the odds. So, and J.K. Dobbins had bad injuries before, debilitating injuries to his knees. Maybe they'll bring him back. Like, I think he's going to get like a minimum deal. I mean, it's the odds are that much not in his favor. I think it came out after the trade deadline that the Ravens were interested in Derrick Henry. I think a 1-2 punch of Derrick Henry by week 4 or week 5 with Derrick Henry and Keaton Mitchell in that changeup role would be awesome for the Ravens. I like betting on Keaton Mitchell actually to come back and be a player that can handle 7 to 11 touches per game by the end of September, early October.
Yeah, current ADP on Mitchell, as I said, is around 170, 171. Not a lot of opportunity cost there, obviously, when you're that deep into the draft on someone like Keaton Mitchell. I had J.K. Dobbins on the list here at number 7. As Evan said, This guy's going into free agency coming off an Achilles tear. Remember, J.K. Dobbins also tore his ACL in August of 2021 and had major complications coming back from that. I kind of think J.K. Dobbins is going to be out of the league. And, it sucks, but it just is what it is. JK and I have had our differences on Twitter before. And by differences, I mean, I tweeted something mentioning him and he quote tweeted and dunked on me. Yeah, I hope he doesn't see this because it's real bad for JK Dobbins right now. Again, I kind of think he's going to be out of the league. Number 6 on our PUP candidates, Tyler Higbee. Remember, Tyler Higbee tore his ACL in that wild card weekend loss. The guy that I'm kind of interested in, Sam, is Davis Allen, the 2023 round 5 pick out of Clemson.
Yep.
Had a couple 4-catch games late in the year. Everybody knows I'm always looking to find some tight end that can play on DK for 2,500. Davis Allen was it a couple times. What do you think about Tyler Higbee's chances of making it back from this, and any other Rams tight end thoughts?
Yeah. I think Tyler Higbee is likely to miss like the vast majority of the season. I couldn't even find his surgery date, but given that he tore the ACL in late January, if you assume sort of a February, March surgery date, sometimes those things are delayed. He won't be back till sort of weeks 10 to the end of the season. So, Tyler Higbee wasn't a guy I was going to be super excited about anyways. I'm not going to touch him in fantasy next year. I agree with you on Davis Allen. I guess like if there's someone who's kind of going to be the Jake Ferguson of this year, I think Davis Allen is maybe a good candidate. Kind of buried on the depth chart last year, but did flash when he got a chance to play. He had 4 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown when Tyler Higbee missed week 14. And it sounds like the team likes him on, a Rams team that's going to throw a ton. I think he could just be a guy, last round of your best ball draft that score some touchdowns for you on sort of an exciting offense. So yeah, I agree with you on being a little bit intrigued with Davis Allen this year.
You're going to get closing line value on Davis Allen, assuming they don't add someone big at tight end, which I don't think they will. Davis Allen's current ADP is 204.8. Evan, I know we've been on Higbee before. I had a ton of Higbee, especially early in the process last year. I was getting a ton of Higbee in drafts, not as much late, but yeah, looks like he's going to be out for most of the year. Any thoughts on Davis Allen or any of the Rams thoughts?
Higbee not draftable. If you look at his contract, they actually recently re-signed him to. He like can't cut him.
Yeah.
So he's going to be back, maybe on a restructure, but almost I think he's maybe the likeliest PUP candidate that we've discussed so far. Tej Seth of Summer Sports, he's an awesome analytics guy. He put out an article this morning talking about what metrics are most important for players entering the NFL, and for tight end athletics, it's all about athleticism. It's all about athleticism. And Davis Allen has some really good metrics in terms of his vertical and his broad jump, but man, he ran a 4.84 40, and that puts him in a rough class. They've also got Bryson Hopkins and Hunter Long, who they traded for last year. So I don't know. That's going to be really up for grabs. I think that they could sign a guy in free agency too.
Sure.
Maybe even draft another tight end. I want to like Davis Allen because I thought he showed something last year. But man, that 40 time, and that's the number one predictor out of all the metrics for tight ends is 40 time, which by the way doesn't even matter at running back or wide receiver, but it matters big time at tight end.
And that's why he lasted until the 5th round of the real NFL draft. He was very much overlooked. All right. Number 5 on the list here is Nick Chubb.
Your comp though, Jake Ferguson also ran slow coming out of Wisconsin.
Yeah.
5 on the list here is Nick Chubb. We went over Nick Chubb plenty on the last episode. Hopefully you guys heard that. The bottom line is that Nick Chubb has had truly, truly freakish efficiency since he entered the NFL. Like breaking our models, breaking our projection system. He's so off the wall with his efficiency. Can he sustain that now that he has yet another serious knee injury that he's rehabbing from? So honestly, Evan, like that's my concern on Nick Chubb. I think he's certainly a PUP candidate to start the year on PUP. We talked about Jerome Ford in the last episode. My concern though is that even when he comes back, he has to be this crazy efficient outlier to kind of meet people's expectations. So Early ADP. Actually, let me check this here. I believe early ADP on Nick Chubb was like middle rounds. Yes, 74.5 is current ADP on Nick Chubb. Evan, any thoughts on him and his rehab beyond what we said on the last episode?
I think that he, as I said in the last episode, I think he's going to come back on a restructured contract. You listen to the stuff that the Browns GM Andrew Berry is just his wording, and it sounds like they want to bring Nick Chubb back, but they're going to need to reduce his salary and or at least his cap charge. And I think that he's headed for reserve PUP with Jerome Ford likely to start the season for the Browns at tailback.
Yep. Sam, anything else to add on this that we didn't talk about last episode?
Yeah, quickly I'll add, I talked to Edwin Porras, who actually was a great help for this entire article, so you should all be following him. But his sort of median projection for Chubb was an 11-month timeline due to this multi-ligament ACL tear. It's not just an ACL, it's, I think, meniscus, MCL, other ligaments involved here. So if you use sort of that 11-month return timeline, that would have Chubb returning somewhere around weeks 5 to 9. So just for people looking to make a projection of when he's going to return, I'd say sort of Chubb missing 4 to 8 weeks around that range is probably the most likely outcome.
I did a bad job. I should have said this at the beginning, but you will miss 4 games. If you start the season on reserve PUP, you will miss 4 games.
Yeah.
You could miss more, but you will miss at least 4 games. So just want to be clear on that.
Yeah, I think it used to be 6, right? They changed
Correct.
it to 4. Yeah.
2022, they changed it to 4. Correct. All right. Number 4 on the list here is Kirk Cousins. So Kirk Cousins is a free agent recovering from an Achilles tear 4 months ago. Now, this Achilles stuff with quarterbacks, man, you guys saw, I know Aaron Rodgers was saying wild stuff, but I also saw him before games like throwing and looking good, not many months removed from an Achilles tear. Similarly, Kirk Cousins, this video pops up yesterday, and it's a tennis court, and I'm getting excited because I love tennis, but they're not playing tennis. It's Kirk Cousins throwing and actually looking pretty good on a tennis court just 4 months removed from his Achilles tear. And so when you're not mobile at all already, like Aaron Rodgers had some mobility when he was younger, not a big deal anymore. Kirk Cousins has no mobility. It strikes me as not that big a deal to be coming off some of these injuries. Now, maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, and it will be a big deal. You can't push off, you can't throw as well, whatever. But my lean is that Cousins is actually going to be okay here. Sam, as Kirk Cousins hits free agency, you're going to have to pay like $50 million to get a year to get Kirk Cousins and coming off this Achilles tear, and that will obviously make me uncomfortable, but there is a dearth of quarterbacks who can throw for 300 yards in an NFL game, and Kirk Cousins is undoubtedly one of them. So it's a bit complicated right here on Kirk Cousins. Any thoughts on him?
Yeah, so I'm more concerned, honestly, with whether Cousins will return to the Vikings than if he's going to be healthy enough to play. I'm based on the timelines and my understanding of it, I'm not too worried about Cousins coming off the Achilles. He has plenty of time to recover for that. It does sound like there was some uncertainty about whether he'd be back with the Vikings. Kevin O'Connell today did have a quote along the lines of that they were going to try to make something work, and he's going to likely be back with the Vikings. So if that's true, I think, I'm fine with Cousins at his current early ADP price. He goes at pick 137, sort of low end QB2 range. I think if I have already drafted, Justin Jefferson or Jordan Addison, I am not too concerned with Cousins' health that it would scare me away from drafting him at that price.
Yeah, it's an interesting case on Cousins, Evan, because he affects so much. I mean, Jordan Addison, and we're going to talk about Hawkinson in a second, and Justin Jefferson, and then also just Cousins himself. So any thoughts on Cousins here coming off of the Achilles?
I think he's going to be good to go. And I think it would be in his best performance-based interest to go back to the Vikings, super quarterback-friendly offense. We saw Nick Mullins light it up and Josh Dobbs for a minute. Justin Jefferson is coming back. There's one asshole on the internet keeps saying that they might trade Justin Jefferson. That is not happening. That is not happening. And then, obviously Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, we're going to talk about him.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
He's in a little bit of a scary spot. But, I think that Kirk Cousins – the thing is that if you look at the free agent market, like it's Kirk Cousins and then it's like Baker Mayfield is the second best quarterback available in free agency. And so that makes me think a little bit along the same lines as Sam is like, yo, if he gets out there on the market, he might get a big offer from a couple of teams
Oh, he will.
Because there's only one good quarterback available in free agency.
Oh, he will. Like I said, I think $50 million. You're gonna have to pay $50 million to get Kirk Cousins per
You
year.
said talking annual salary, $50 million?
Yeah.
Wow.
Jeez, is that right? That's wild.
Yeah.
But the cap went up a ton.
Exactly.
Yeah, I guess $50 million is only like less than 20% of your cap now. So that's
right.
That's not that crazy.
The cap. This is actually something we should talk about just for a minute. The cap went up to what, 230 million?
I think 260 now.
Yeah, 250.
Yeah. It went up 30 million, which was actually way more than people anticipated.
Yeah.
So that's going to help a lot of teams
for sure,
and players too.
Oh, by the way, before I go on here, Evan, myself, Leone, and Herzig are doing our first 3-round mock of the year. Now, doing a 2024 fantasy football mock in February may strike some of you as weird. However, we're doing it. So if you want to watch myself, Silva, Leone, and Herzig do a 3-round mock, be sure you're subscribed to our YouTube. We're doing that later this week. Check it out. All right. Keep it moving here to Mike Williams. We hit on this on the last episode also. Sounded to me like a clean ACL tear for Mike Williams in week 3. We discussed all of the issues with the cap and the wide receiver situation for the Chargers. I think it's a toss-up whether Mike Williams is back or not, maybe slightly leaning towards not back. But either way, he's going to be rehabbing this ACL tear. Sam, do you think Mike Williams is likely to be ready for week 1?
I think he is. He's likely to be ready for week 1. Sort of a 9 to 10 month return timeline, which would be common for someone with a clean ACL. It would put him back in July or August. So I think he's pretty low odds of hitting the PUP list unless there's some unknown complication with the injury. The bigger question for whether he's a good pick at his current ADP, which I think is around pick 100, is what team he lands on. Certainly there's teams out there that need wide receivers like the Chiefs and Bills, and you can talk yourself into a situation like that. But there's plenty of bad landing spots out there. Like, we talked about the Patriots have tons of cap space. They need a wide receiver. It's just tons of uncertainty in Mike Williams, just not knowing where he's going to land. But I do think he'll, maybe command something like 2 years, 20-ish million, something like that, or maybe a 1-year prove it deal. I still think he'll get decent money in this free agency class, just given, what everyone's trying to do in the NFL these days, which is pair a couple good pass catchers with their quarterback.
Sure. And yeah, a lot's going to depend on what the Chargers do with their first pick in the draft. Evan, anything on Mike Williams beyond what we talked about last episode?
No, but I think that the Chargers should work to bring him back, albeit on a massively restructured deal, and they should use the number 5 pick on one of these stud wide receivers.
All right. Number 2 on our PUP list candidates is a rookie, a incoming draft eligible prospect, Jonathan Brooks, running back out of Texas. I'm no draft bro, but I believe he was going to easily be the top running back in this class, but blew out his ACL on November 11th. So, Sam, where you at on Jonathan Brooks right now and his risk reward? There's a lot of uncertainty. We don't know where he's going to be drafted. We don't know what his draft capital is going to be. We don't know what team he's going to go to. And we also don't know exactly how his ACL rehab is going.
Yeah, tons of uncertainty. So I'm a little concerned that he's going to miss some games to the start of the year. I put his sort of risk of landing on the reserve PUP as sort of medium high. I think I'm sort of assuming something like a return in weeks 4 to 5, if I were to put a guess on it based on just sort of the injury return timelines from an ACL surgery on December 5th. I think in best ball, though, he goes pretty late. He's at like pick 120 right now. And yeah, he's sort of a consensus top 3 running back in this draft. Anytime you're drafting someone pre-draft, you're kind of just, spinning the lottery wheel to see where these guys land and where they end up. But as a guy who's probably likely to get third round draft capital, something like that, I think pick 120, 130, where he's going now, makes him a pretty attractive pick, even with potentially missing a couple games to start the year.
The combine is this week, Evan. The people need to know: will you be in attendance? Will you be drinking with Sean Payton and getting more rumors this year? And have you looked at all at the running back class yet?
No, I'm going to start looking this week. I've been focused on free agency stuff, but yeah, I'm planning on going to the combine maybe for Thursday night and Friday night. But we'll see.
All right.
I don't know anything about Jonathan Brooks. All I know is his numbers: over 6 yards per carry in 3 years at Texas, 25 catches in 11 games is pretty good for college last year. But yeah, I'll be learning more about him soon.
All right. Stay tuned for Evan's trip report from the NFL Combine. All right. Number 1 on the list is TJ Hawkinson. Now, TJ Hawkinson tore his ACL and MCL in his right knee on Christmas Eve. If you give him a 9-month timetable, it's going to be tight. And even when these guys first come back, sometimes they're eased in. And so makes me a little bit queasy here on Hawkinson, especially with the Kirk Cousins situation up in the air. So, Sam, how do you think about Hawkinson's chances of landing on PUP and how you'd handle him?
Yeah, so he was a guy where his surgery was actually delayed by like a full month after the injury. So my understanding is that the injury timelines, it's actually should be post surgery, not post injury. So that makes it even worse for Hawkinson. I put his projected return somewhere back half of the season, weeks 9 to 15 ish, depending on if there's any complications there. But yeah, he's a guy that you're just going to get the second half of the season out of at best in the most likely outcome. So I'm pretty hesitant on his current best ball price. I think he's like around pick 100.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems, that's 8th, 9th round. That just seems way too early for me for a guy who's going to miss half the season. And, likely he's not going to be back at full strength until, maybe the last couple of games of the season. But yeah, that's a tough situation for right now for me.
We have Hawkinson 122 overall. His ADP is 104 overall. Hawkinson was awesome, Evan. I mean, ever since he got to Minnesota, he was catching so many balls. It was wild. So yeah, major concern here. They have Johnny Munt. They have Josh Oliver, neither of whom can come anywhere near what Hawkinson can do. Any thoughts on the Hawkinson situation, Evan?
Yeah, I would really have a tough time drafting him around that 100 range right now because I would project him to start the season on reserve PUP. Johnny Munt is a free agent, but they obviously can bring him back. He's Kevin O'Connell's boy from the Rams. And then Josh Oliver, they gave a big contract to last year. He's a blocking tight end, but they gave him a big contract. So they do have 2 options behind him. I don't think that they're going to go spend any big money on a free agent tight end, or they'll just bring in like guys to tide him over to when TJ Hawkinson returns.
Breaking news into the show: Adam Schefter is adding a tight end to the free agency pool. As we speculated last episode, Falcons are releasing veteran tight end Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith will be released by the Falcons. We talked about that last episode. But yeah, I mean, there's someone like that as a stopgap till Hawkinson gets back, I think is well within the realm of outcomes. All right. That is going to do it for this look at 2024 PUP candidates. Be sure you stay tuned to Sam's article. He'll be updating the PUP list candidates, and hopefully we'll get some more injury information throughout the off season. Really important stuff to stay on top of. Sam, tell the people again where they can find you on the Twitter machine.
Yep. You can find me on Twitter at Sherman_FFB. And yeah, I mentioned it, but I did want to give another shout out to Edwin Porras. You can find him on Twitter at FB Injury Doc, and he was just a huge help for all this research. So he's my go-to football Twitter doctor. There's probably a better term that he wants to be referred to as, but he's a great source for information there.
Agreed. Okay, perfect. That is going to do it for Sam, for Evan, for producer Ryan, for producer Luke. Next piece of content is YouTube only, that 3-round mock, again, with myself, Evan, Herzig, and Leone. Check that out on YouTube. Good luck, everybody.